We're the fastest growing podcast in the world. We're getting billions and billions of listens.
Anthony Smith is Steven Bartlett's director of trailers for The Diary of a CEO, the man behind the most emotionally charged podcast intros. He has worked with giants like Disney, Marvel, and Star Wars.
The things we do to just bring one episode, one trailer, one production to life is pretty incredible. It's tough, constant pressure, so emotionally draining.
Anthony talks about the power of a podcast and a personal brand, the raw reality of content creation, and working with Steven Bartlett.
One thing we never ever want to sacrifice is the story, the emotion, the pace.
It's really hard to stop watching.
We've still got Everest to climb here. If you want to go on this journey with Steven Bartlett, it will be the rockiest career journey of your life. It's the most cliche thing I've ever said in my life, and I'm still going to say it because I can't think of anything else to explain it, but this is probably going to get me rinsed by my mates forever. Can't believe I'm saying this. Fucking hell. I can't believe I've just said that. Cut.
Subscribe to this channel and I'll make sure more leadership stories show up in your feed. Thank you for being here. Anthony, you're working on one of the world's biggest podcasts. You'd never really watched a podcast, or you weren't really into them before Diary of a CEO.
No, I didn't really have time. The idea of watching or listening to a 3-hour podcast, I don't think I ever had 3 hours spare to do that. So my upbringing was always about films. So any opportunity I got, I would watch a film or I'd watch a TV show. Yeah. And I love documentaries, so I'd start watching documentaries. Any of that was my preferred option. Yeah. At school, I wasn't what they would describe as academically gifted when it came to things like maths and science and that stuff where you need to know stuff. I wasn't very good. It just never came in. I struggled with my speech. I couldn't say words and I had to go to speech therapy. I also had anger problems, probably because of that. I was an attention seeker, and where I thrived in was like media and writing little stories and writing these short little scripts, and that's because that's what I love doing. And I loved in my spare time doing photography, and so if I go on holiday, all I would do is wind up my family and my friends, because I would be about like 10 meters behind them for about 5 minutes taking photos of a bird flying, all that sort of thing. That was how I grew up, and I learned from a young age that I could either try and force myself to be what these people wanted me to be, whereas it wasn't playing to my strengths. I still don't know what Pythagoras theory is. When it comes to times table, I maybe can go up to the 5 times table. I can do 10. 10's quite easy. But that's not how my brain computes, and I don't know why. And I've always been on the side of watching films and storytelling and loving all of that. So that's what I started bringing into my life and then into my work, is trying to entertain people. And when I first started, when I wanted to be an actor, that's what I was doing. I was putting on performances literally, and I was singing, I was dancing, I was doing all of this thing to try and grab people's attention. I sort of do that now. I just do it behind a computer screen and doing an edit form, but the principles are still there of telling a cohesive story that takes your audience on a journey from A to B to C. If you can play to their emotions and if you can manipulate it in certain ways to make them feel what you want them to feel, that's when you can start getting them to do what you want them to do. If you want them to buy a certain product, or if you want them to, a good analogy I think works, this is more of a hunch, but it's an analysis of charity videos. So I find with charities that want money from people, as in a donation, play to the strengths of fear and sadness, because you want to make people feel distraught enough or emotional enough to want to give money to go towards that particular person that they'll see in a TV advert or they'll see on a poster. if you're a charity that sells products where that money will go towards a charity, but you don't really know too much about the charity, the focus is more on the product, you want to lean more into things like humor, energy, and where it's a little bit more lighthearted, because ultimately you want people to make a decision on the product that they want to buy, not on the footage of a young child or anything like that. So charities are quite clever in that sense of how they can manipulate you depending on what the action they want you to be. If they want you to buy a product, we're going to be lighthearted, we're going to be fun. If we want you to give us money, we're going to pull more on the emotional heartstrings and tell that story. And so when you understand those different elements, you can sort of tweak them in together to see how you can manipulate an audience to do what you want them to do. And that's marketing 101. That's been done for years. And when I applied for this role, it wasn't because I had a love of podcasting. It wasn't because I knew who Steven Bartlett was. So for me, it was just an opportunity to create something a little bit different that we hadn't seen before, bring the skills that I'd taken from the film and TV industry and when I owned a company in the marketing industry, combine them all together and recreate what we now see as almost like the standard for podcasting, which is video trailers or intros.
Yeah, and they are amazing. And we're going to be talking a lot more about them in a moment. But why do you think video podcasting is going to dominate the podcasting industry?
Podcasting really just ticks so many boxes for so many people. Podcasting as a whole allows people to come on and tell their stories uninterrupted. It allows experts to explain their views or their findings without the constraints of what traditional media may have. For example, you have sites like YouTube who are really invested in podcasting. And YouTube is one of the biggest platforms on the planet. And so when you combine those two together, video podcasts just make sense. And for us with the Diary of a CEO, that was something I believe Steve wanted to get in quite early, is this idea of video podcasting and making that the standard for podcasting. And for us, it works so well because when you have a guest who is exclusively telling us about their life, which may be emotional, it may be daunting, it may be horrific in some circumstances, seeing the emotion and seeing that guest just adds a whole new level of impact to the viewer. And so for me, as my background's in film and TV, that's what I grew up watching. I didn't really read the books, I watched the films. And so visual podcast for me is the dream. It mixes both together. You get the impact of the listening experience, but you also get to see visually how it's impacting the guest in that moment as well.
Flightstory is all in on this, isn't it? On this video podcasting. And they're not just stopping at one with Diary of a CEO. They're investing in multiple podcasts now. So now I just see your team, pockets of your team, they're just multiplying, growing at a phenomenal speed. So impressive, very ambitious. Tell me about this network of podcasts that you're building.
Flightstory has been the birth child of Steve for a while. I know since I've been working there, I know there was times when he went back and forth on this idea of what if we take all the lessons and the failures and the experimentation from DOAC and push these onto other podcasts and see if we can grow other podcasts and create this agency and this huge catalogue of shows that are all impacting people in different ways, covering different topics. And one day he decided to actually go ahead with it, and then he found Georgie and CB, who are the co-founders, and them three together have created this mammoth agency now. And it's incredible to watch it as almost like one of the tiny cogs in the corner, watching this unfold, going from such a small team to seeing that almost 100 odd people coming into this agency, creating these shows and creating different characters and all of these different brands. It's incredible to see, and it's all from this idea that we just want to try and make a better humanity, and we want to educate people, and we want people to be able to have and listen to uncomfortable conversations and grow as human beings. That's sort of that forefront, really. If we can just play a small role in making people feel more aligned with the world and with everything that's going on, and maybe change a path to more successful future, etc. Those are the sort of things that the podcasts are really wanting to promote, to make us live like healthier, better lives. And to actually see that unfold is pretty incredible.
Are they quite diverse, this collective of podcasts? Like, who's driving them? Who even picks the host?
I mean, that's a whole beast in itself. We've got, so for example, we have Steven Bartlett on the Dio CEO.
Yeah.
We have Paul Brunson, who's arguably the nicest guy on planet Earth. I love that man. He's coming in from a love and relationships perspective. He is the love scientist, the information that he has in his head, and so generously puts them in books every now and again. And now he's doing it in a podcast is incredible. And so he's sort of given us an insight on how we can have better relationships, whether it's with friends, whether it's with our partners. And then we have Davina, who, I mean, is the powerhouse in the TV industry. She doesn't need it. Yeah, she needs no introduction. And she's picking up the mantle of a stage of life, especially for women, that isn't really talked about a lot. And so those are three very diverse hosts right there. And then we've just launched with Christian Holmes, who's the performance scientist, Dr. Christian Holmes, actually, very recently. And she works for Whoop, and her whole thing is just how we can all be healthier and live a more fulfilling life. And so we have now 4 very diverse podcasts going out for very different target audiences, covering very different topics. And so it's just really exciting to see where they're going.
So I see where it's all going. But even Steven Bartlett, he had this fear of, I saw it on behind the scenes, AI. So he saw the AI wave hurtling towards him, and he says, oh my God, this is going to kill us. But he felt the fear. And what I loved about this scene was that he used the fear to fuel him and to go ahead and build this network. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think he was thinking at that time?
I never know what Steve is thinking, to be honest. What goes on in Steve's mind, it will probably need to be studied. It's but this is actually a question I get asked a lot by so many content creators, is the impact of AI. I literally had a voice note from someone last week who messaged me and said, is it worth me even going into the editing industry because of AI? And is it going to take over? What's it going to do? And I understand it, because when you read the news and when you see so much of what's going on, the growth of AI is going to change every industry like never before. And the reality of it is, anyone who says they know what's going to happen is probably lying. No one knows how this is going to happen, what's going to happen. And so the best you can do in those situations is lean into it. The people there's this saying that's sort of going around, which is true, which is, it's not AI that's going to take the jobs, it's the people who know how to use AI that are going to take the jobs. And it's true, it's you lean into the strengths of the industry at the time. That's where you make the money, that's where you see the highest levels of growth. Daniel Priestley, who's obviously a huge voice on AI and this digital economy that we're in, a lot of the time he says the people who are making the most amount of money are the people leaning towards this technology revolution that's happening. And it's true, that's where all the money's going. So why wouldn't you naturally go to where the money's going if you want to make it? And AI is the same. AI is going to disrupt every single industry. It's already massively disrupted a lot of them. We also have been using elements of AI for a long time that a lot of people don't really realize. We use AI in the trailers, there's AI in our thumbnails, there's AI in the production process. So we are using elements of AI already. Loads of industries are. And I think it's one of those where you can either sit back and worry about AI taking over your life and taking your job and leaving us with nothing to do, or you can lean into it and be like, AI is not going anywhere. Let's try and adapt as much as we can to this growing, almost mammoth industry that's going to disrupt everything. And that's where I think Steve was with it. You know, it's not going anywhere, so let's lean into it. Let's make it part of the process. And if anything, it makes our lives easier, can make us more successful.
Yeah. I think, did he not explore doing AI podcasts? I saw that on behind the scenes at one point as well. He's like, oh, AI podcast.
Yeah.
So what did he do? How far did he go down that rabbit hole?
I mean, we're still testing all this stuff. There was one where it was a Manchester, he's a Man U fan. So there was a Manchester United podcast where the AI would take all of the news of that week, scroll through all the most valuable bits of news, compile it, and then the AI would then create the script and read it out. So if you're a Man U fan, you only have to listen to this podcast to find out everything you need to know about what's happened that week with Man U. So that's something that we're still looking into, how AI is going to impact the podcasting industry. And we're still at the early stages. You know, there's still a lot of things that AI cannot do and cannot replicate yet. And so you do need to be careful of leaning too much into it, that it can essentially ruin your podcast or ruin the quality. But he is and the company is very much got AI at the forefront.
It's kind of like, watch this space with that.
Yeah, it's like everything. You grow as it grows. So AI will just continue getting better. So what we'll do to try and elevate the podcast will naturally get better as well, and how we'll lean into AI will increase as the software and as the technology allows us to do it to get better.
Talking about behind the scenes, I want to pull back the curtains a little bit and look at the nitty-gritty and the collaborative way in which you and your team work. What does it actually take to get a Diary of a CEO from a cut to an upload, right? So it's like, you know, how are you working across teams, because it's grown so much? I mean, you were saying to me earlier that when you joined, it was a team of 10?
Yeah, 10 to 15 people, I think.
And now it's how many?
100 odd.
Ooh, okay. So
Not just for Dive.
in Flightstory,
Yes.
right? Okay, wow. Over a period of how many? Like,
It was sort of like steady growth for probably about 2 years. And then, since Flightstory got announced, it was like just went straight up in terms of like the number of people that we were bringing in to work on the other shows. And for example, my team went from, it just started with me doing trailers. Now there's 4 of us on the team. It's sort of been a very wavy road in terms of how many people we're bringing in. But yeah, it's grown pretty sharply.
I wanted to get a sense of, how do you all collaborate behind the scenes then? So what might the end-to-end process look like when you've given birth to to an episode, like with all of the cross collaboration, maybe late night editing? So what goes into getting it out? What's the timeline like? What's the process like?
The weirdest thing with this is there's no set process. We have our checklist where it would go from guest booking, guest research, recording, production, post-production, marketing. So you follow them sort of stages, but how that goes into it varies on how fast the turnaround times need to be. When we go abroad to shoot the podcast, we'll sometimes record 3 in a day. So we're sort of juggling that, and then obviously all the data wrangling and all of that side of stuff. Doing that will change the process, and then it'll be when certain team members will go on holiday, that changes the process. So it's actually quite exciting because it keeps it fresh every time. But we've always had this level of urgency with the company, and I think that's one of the biggest drivers that we've had, and that's what's kept us always on our toes. So for me, when I first started, I had about 2.5 days to turn around the trailer and the intros for the episodes, and that's still similar of the case, even though the processes have changed a bit, because now I'm also training and I'm also looking at the analysis of things, and then we're also running experiments and doing all this sort of thing. So the reality of it is, don't think I could ever sit back and be like, we do this, then this, then this, then this, in this time frame or this time frame. The way I almost see it is like, I've got 2.5 days to turn this around. I'm going to fill it in those 2.5 days, no matter what it will be. And there'll be times where I just cannot figure it out, and I'll waste an entire day just stressing about how to make this trailer work, how to make the narrative work. I can't find music, pulling my hair out, and then it'll all click, but I've lost a day, so I've still got a day and a half to turn it around. And so you're pushing everything you can into that day and a half to get it all complete. And so that level of urgency is something our entire company thrives on. And it's probably been one of our biggest gains as a company, is finding people who inherit this urgency within themselves, that they just don't want to settle. They don't want to just do their set times and tick those boxes. They want to try and make it the best they can, even if it means having to work a bit harder, a bit longer until it's completed.
We talk about virality, don't we? Everyone talks about making something go viral. And the trailer is the heartbeat of virality, I think. So it's that first impression, it's that hook. It's that I'm going to stop the scroll and I need to watch this now. And your trailers managed to do that. What is that process? What is the process that you go through then, that you totally control? When you get that spark, that little idea, walk us through some kind of process that you go through.
Yeah, so it all starts when the episode is given to me.
Yeah.
We will transcribe the entire thing, and I'll literally put myself in a room somewhere and spend about 3 hours reading. So the trailer that's coming out on Thursday, I think that was about 300 pages. So I'll spend reading those 300 pages, highlighting everything that I think's interesting, every single bit of context. And then on another screen, as I'm doing that, I'm then typing my notes and certain quotes which I think are really important, and I'm putting them into their own topics. So if we're talking about an economy, one might be about tax, one might be about wealth, one might be about living standards, etc. And so I'll start taking elements of the transcript, putting those into this note form, and then if we circle back to tax, or if there's a line which I really liked, that will then go back in there. So once I've read that, I then turn to that screen, which is now in itself probably about 7 pages long.
Yes.
Then I'll read all through that.
Yes.
And then from there, we'll start writing a script, and the script will usually come out probably around about 3 to 4 minutes long. So then the task has gone from turning a 2.5 hour episode into 4 minutes to then 90 seconds. So then we just chip away at it without the sacrifice of the narrative or the fluidity, making sure that we hit those peaks and we hit those troughs and we keep that wave going so it's never flat. And then once we've got that, we pull it into the foundation, and then after that it's music, and I'll often download between 30 to 40 different music tracks, test every single one of those until I find one that I'm happy with, and then I'll start creating B-roll place cards that get sent to Cam, who's our B-roll editor. So he'll start making those as I focus more on the text elements and sort of sweeten it all up and sound design. And then once that's all completed, we then go through the text, start adding all the text, start doing the ratios. Prior to that, which is a little, this was something that we didn't used to do, but we've been doing as we've evolved and as we've introduced experimentation and data more into our lives and into the process. We'll get the results of the highest performing thumbnail ideas. So then that will sort of tease into what topics we cover in that moment. I also take the guest's brief, which is done for Steve to read up on the guest, and in that will also contain the most viewed search terms on Google, the most watched clips that the guest has done previously. So I'll sort of analyze through all of those, find, okay, so people are really hot on this particular topic, maybe that should become the hook. So then you sort of compile all of these different assets and pages of notes together until you eventually get your 20 odd second hook, and then you flow out the rest of the story. So it's sort of it's a bit of a mad process, to be honest. It's changed quite a few times, and it's, whenever I explain it, I always get a little bit lost to think, how do we do that all in one day? Because the rest of the day and a half is like sweetening it all up and doing amends and changes and all that sort of thing.
So you do all of that, what you've just described, in 24 hours, in one working day?
Pretty much. The idea will be to read and have a foundation by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so that is essentially getting all of its bare bones into something that I can like physically see, physically watch. And then the next day will then be just cluttering it away, chipping away at it, because the one thing we never ever want to sacrifice is the story, the emotion, the pace. And so when you're trying to get 4 minutes down to 90 seconds, that's a huge challenge in itself. So we'll then spend hours finding what I call filler words, and some which I was training Liv up on, which is, how can we take this sentence, which is about 20 seconds, how can we create that to turn it into 5 seconds without losing the essence of what they're saying, but also, or taking anything out of context, but also meaning, if we can do that, that means we can put in another soundbite to add even more context. And so it's all those sort of elements that go into the second day. And then you get to your half day, which is all your, like, the admin side. So it's the thumbnails, it's the ratios, that sort of thing.
In this process, are you using, what's your tech stack from start to finish?
Pages, Premiere Pro, After Effects. Obviously, we have quite a few sites online for like music and any footage. You
don't curate your own music, AI music?
Not yet. This is one of those where we'd love to curate our own music, and potentially we might get to that stage. The problem is with it is just time. Whenever I've before AI, whenever I've spoken to sound designers and music composers, some of them want a week to 2 weeks to compose something. And I've always found, this has always been one of our biggest challenges when we've looked for freelancers, is whenever we ask them, how long do you think you can take to replicate a certain process, it's usually between 4 days to 6 days.
Yeah, even for Steven Bartlett.
Well, yeah, and it's so it's always quite hard to tell them, okay, well, we have to do it in half a day. And so it's a huge shift that thankfully at my last place, I sort of got known as being the quick editor. Right. So I was very, very quick to make decisions, to make cuts, and to create an edit. And I brought that into this process, which we sort of need because we release 2 episodes a week, so it's 2 trailers a week. And so replicating that is a challenge in itself. And so you have to use certain tools at your disposal where it can help with the urgency, but cannot without damaging the quality or the story or the emotion.
This is interesting. And how many episodes do you film in a week? Because you release 2, but how many do you actually film?
Steve is so busy now. You know, he's never in one country for more than a few days. So he'll be going off doing talks, and then he'll be filming, or he'll be recording podcasts in another country. So it varies really. We can have maybe recording maybe once in a week to doing 3, 6, 9, to maybe about 12 to 15 in a week. It can really vary based on what we're doing at the time, the schedule, how the guests are booked in, where in the what country we're in, etc.
Yeah, not a lot of people might know that all of these episodes are not actually recorded in London. I didn't realize how global the Diary of a CEO is. 1 minute you could be in New York. Tell me about the setups.
It sort of goes back to what I was saying before with the AI, is you go where the opportunity is. And when I first joined, they were teetering this idea of going abroad to get American guests. So they flew out to LA. They didn't have a set, and they rented out a villa, and they had a bunch of guests there. And we found the response from the viewers and the caliber of guests that we got when in LA there sort of signified it's like, okay, this is something that we can do here. And I think the biggest challenge you've got is staying in that same rut, whether it's physically or whether it's mentally. And so with DOAC, if we just stayed in London and we only were able to get guests to come to one studio, we wouldn't be able to get half the guests that we brought on, just because of things like scheduling, and they might not be in the country at that time when Steve's in the country at that time. And so Steve and the team really just saw this opportunity to grow here, where we can grow more in America, interview more American guests, and replicate the studio that we have in London in America. So to the viewer, nothing changes. We want to make sure the viewer always feels like this is a DOAC set. This is the studio. This is where they sit. This is how it's lit. This is how it's filmed. And so for the viewer, the idea is nothing changes. But for us, it's an exciting opportunity for us to get guests that we never thought we could get. And ultimately, the main part of it as well is it's allowed us to never sacrifice the one thing that I think would hurt the podcast, and that's doing things over Zoom, for example. On those interviews, we nenever wanted to do that.
So you'd never explore doing online?
We've done it once.
Did you?
And it did actually work, but it was a very different type of show. And I think for me, it's everything in my work and in the team's work has always been about justification. If you can justify it, and if it has merit, and if it has a strong reason, then do it. If you don't, find another way. And so with Zoom interviews, I've always found, I've done a couple on a podcast, and even I can feel the difference. When we're talking together, you feel more of the energy, you feel that connection a lot more. When you're on Zoom, the quality is never as great. You don't have that same buzz, that same energy. And so we didn't want to lose that for Dark, especially for the topics and the guests that we have on. When we have celebrities, for example, who are opening up about a heartfelt moment in their life, doing that over Zoom just doesn't feel like it would ever have the same impact. And so that's something that we never wanted to sacrifice. And if it meant going abroad, building a set and filming in America, then so be it. And we've done it, and it's been an amazing learning curve. It's been an amazing success, and it's really grown the podcast. So it was a great decision by Steve and the team on that one.
Tell me about the Richard Branson episode.
So Richard Branson is, again, someone who needs no introduction and played such a huge role in Steve's life from entrepreneur to entrepreneur. And so he's been a guest that the Diary CEO have always wanted on. He's considered a unicorn. And so when there was an opportunity to have him on, as with everything in life, it's never as simple as someone turning up and recording a show. There's so many logistics that have to go into it, especially when you're the caliber of Richard Branson. And the only way we could get him at that time would be to go to New York and film with him. And so that turned into the plan, and the feeling behind it is we didn't want the viewers to think that we went to New York to film with one guest. How amazing would it be if the Richard Branson, Sir Richard Branson, I believe, came to our studio and recorded on our chairs by our table, speaking to Steve. And so Steve was just like, let's build a studio in New York, and so the audience will have no idea. And the reality of it is that was the first time we'd built a studio out abroad. So it was me, Jack, and a freelance set builder that we found. And to say it was a run and gun job, I guess is the only way I can explain it. Is luckily Jack had a background in a bit of construction, but it was very much of us like, how can we recreate the Diary of a CEO mirror that sits behind the guest? Go to IKEA, went to a little DIY store and found like these tiny little circle magnets so we can try and replicate the little divots on it, because a lot of the stuff that's in the studio was purpose built.
Yes.
So to get it made will not only take a lot of time, would also take a lot of money. So how can we, like, again, have this urgency to create something in time for when Richard Branson walks through the door so we can interview him?
Wasn't it Thanksgiving as
And
well?
it was Thanksgiving in New York, so everything was shut. Everyone wanted to celebrate. No one wanted to work that day or wanted to work late because they wanted to get back to their families. And so that was probably one of the biggest challenges I've ever had in any career, and it was nothing even to do with trailers. But it still remains as one of my proudest moments, and I still talk to Jack about it today, and there's still these photos and these time lapses of us building this mirror and buying these metallic strips and recreating the dark mirror. And he brought the wallpaper from the London studio that we had left over, and he seriously miscalculated how much there was, and we unraveled it, and it only took up maybe about a quarter of the entire set that we needed. So we were desperately trying to find a way, how can we recreate the wallpaper in time and get that done? No answers, because again, it was Thanksgiving, or it was just extortionate amounts of money. And then we just sort of we came up with this idea of like, okay, let's frame up where the guest will be. That camera cannot move, and we literally point of frame to where the wallpaper was, used all of the wallpaper that we had just for that one frame, and then everything else was just sort of painted in grey behind it. And then was like, right, we just got to make sure all the lights are off for when Richard walks in, so he doesn't see like this shocking job on the wall. But the result was incredible. You know, we looked, I mean, me and Jack can obviously tell the difference, but we looked at the framing and it was like, I don't think for a lot of people they would have guessed.
You pulled it off. You pulled it off, because when you told me that story earlier, I had no idea. I really did think he came to London. I really did think it was Steven Bartlett's kitchen.
Yeah, but I mean, kudos to Jack. It's a lot of it was just quick thinking and trying to figure out how can we achieve this in the time that we've got and in the best possible way and without letting the standards slip. And again, that's just something that's inherent with the Diary of a CEO and now Flightstory, which is we had this level of urgency, but quite frankly, and it can sound a little bit controversial, but the team usually outcare than a lot more other people. The level of detail and the level of experimentation and the things we do to just bring one episode, one trailer, one production to life is pretty incredible. And when you actually take a step back, as I can literally do in our office now because I'm right at the back, and see this happen, it's so amazing to watch. And it's something that we celebrate with the team. So we have a gratitude page, and we have a 1% page, and we have an experimentation page. And that's where the team can just shout out their team members for doing these tiny little aspects just to make it that little bit better. And it's something that we do with the trailers a lot. So it'll be things like, we'll crop in on a guest and we'll add a tiny little wobble, and then we'll add a tiny little blur, and then we'll slowly fade out of that blur, just so it gives this idea that the cameraman has zoomed in and crash zoomed on this person. And we're doing all of that just to emphasize one point. And the level of detail that we go into the B-roll and the tiny little Easter eggs that we plant in there, it's, at the time, a lot of people would question why the hell we do half the things we do. And I do get questioned on LinkedIn a lot of the time. It's like, what's the point? What is the point of doing 1%? So I just like, if people can't straight away see it or hear it, or if it's not blatantly obvious, why do it? Because a lot of people will miss. And it's true, a lot of people will miss it. But there's a reason why we do it, is because whether you know it or not, subconsciously, those little decisions are having a huge impact on your emotions and on how you feel about the guest, how you feel about the episode, how you feel about the intro. And when you combine all of those little aspects together, that's how you get the trailers that we have today. It is literally the compound interest of 1% over the years, which has now been, I guess, maybe 300% worth of little details that we've put in, that we've just implemented time and time again, which is why people love them the way they do, and why I get so many incredible messages from people and people wanting to replicate them. And one of the biggest questions I get is, how do I get started, or how can I make it like yours? The simple truth is, I'm not a great editor. I've never learned editing. The only reason I became an editor was because I started a company with my ex-business partner, Joe. We had no money. We were so terrified of getting out a loan because we didn't want to owe money back, and we didn't want to fall into bankruptcy. We were terrified because you don't get taught that stuff in school. And so the only reason I became an editor was because we couldn't afford an editor to do the edits that we were making. So naturally, I just kept working at them until they were great for our clients. And then we managed to grow to people like Asda and Sainsbury's and the Army and the NHS. And we then started doing TV commercials within a year of starting the company, which was mammoth for us. And we started working with some of the biggest marketing agencies in Manchester at the time. And that was just because we had to do it. You don't have a choice. And the only way you can get better at something is if you keep doing it, and if you keep having that level of urgency, and you care to your purest, deepest self, that everything you do has to be justified, that it has to have a reason for doing it, and it doesn't matter how small it is. And I go off these passionate rants about the 1% all the time, and I don't mean to, but that is why the Dial of a CEO just keeps growing the way it is. We could just sit back, enjoy what we've made, and go, you know what, we're the fastest growing podcast in the world. We're getting billions and billions of listens. Why don't we just keep what we're doing, keep playing it safe? We know this formula works. Why? Because that's not how we want to do it. The second we do that, we feel like we'll start teetering off the edge. People will then catch up, and then you're on a level playing field. So how can we keep growing? How can we get more subscribers? How can we get more listeners? How can we increase our AVD? How can I make more people go from Instagram to YouTube? How can we do all of this and keep growing? Because in our eyes, we've only just started, which is crazy to think of just where we are. And for a lot of people who look at us, see we are already at what they think is the top. Whereas for us, we've literally just reached base camp. And that's how we see it. We've still got Everest to climb here. And we can only get there by these 1%, by this urgency, by caring more than everyone else, by working the late nights here and there, by making sure that everything we do is done with purpose and justified and has the impact that we want it to be. Rant over.
I've got so many questions off the back of that. Look, the attention span of society today is so short and getting shorter. There are clips that are all over social media that are podcast clips, right? But the Diary of a CEO clips seem to cut through all the rest. So you are doing something that is capturing, like they say, the attention economy is everything at the moment. What is it then? What is it? What is it in those 90 little seconds? Is it the hook? Is it the visual that really captures that individual? Because there's some element of it is social media, and we'll talk about that as well, and how does that influence engagement and discovery. But once they've landed on your clip, and I'm talking from experience, it's really hard to stop watching. It is so damn juicy. So what the hell are you doing to capture that 3 seconds? How are you hooking people?
I mean, from a trader's perspective, the main thing we will never sacrifice on is storytelling. And in its core, storytelling is what drives all of our decision making. It drives our emotions. The stories we hear and the stories we tell not only affect us, it affects everyone else around us. And for years, telling stories is how we used to hear the news. It's how one of my favorite stories is how Frankenstein became the story of Frankenstein. It was told as people were gathered around the fire. This is what I think happened.
Yes.
I wasn't there. But what I believe is people were gathered around the fire and they would tell horror stories as like this little tradition. And one of them was Frankenstein. And it started off as this little campfire story and that just grew into a book, which then grew into films, which is now a ride at Universal, literally opened this week. The growth of this character that so many people know about, that's been replicated so many times, started with one tiny little story by a campfire. I think that's incredible. Everything we know about the people before us are from the stories that we hear. And even in politics, there's one thing I always remember, which was around the COVID time, where Steve was talking to an expert around about the injections and the vaccines, and she knew that the vaccines was beneficial for us. She knew that. She's a scientist. They had that data. She knew that it would help us. But yet the way Donald Trump spoke about the vaccines, he turned it into a story to the extent where she was doubting whether the vaccines worked.
Right.
Donald Trump isn't a scientist, he's not an expert, but one thing he does do well is he can tell stories and he can grab people's emotions, rightly or wrongly. That's what he does well. That's how he's managed to get where he is. He's very good at telling stories. He's very good at crafting emotions and keeping people latched onto those emotions. And the best marketers in the world all have that ability to tell a story and to take an audience on a journey, whether it's through a static image or a video. That's the one thing they never compromise on, and that's the thing that they do so well. Mix that in with some basic understandings of the human psychology and what draws us to things and what keeps us there and what people want. Combine them two together, you've got yourself gold.
What you're describing there is personality-led content. The power of storytelling. So in this economy, the attention economy, where everyone's fighting for attention, why is it so important to have a personal brand?
When it comes to personal branding, you are, especially in today's society, you are competing with so many people. So from my side as an editor, there are thousands upon thousands of editors just on LinkedIn. I know that because I get messages and comments from incredible and very technically gifted editors all the time asking me questions, etc. So I know how big the pool is for editors. And to be honest, probably about 60 to 70% of them will probably be better and more technically gifted than I am at editing. All they have to do is do one course at college on focusing on editing, and they'll be better than me. They'll know the technical terms, they'll know all this sort of thing. And so how do you compete in a pool where chances are you're not the best? Chances are you're either bang in the middle, maybe a bit up, maybe a bit down. How do you compete with that? And ultimately it comes down to the personal branding and the stories that you tell about yourself. And so for me, when it comes to this idea of a personal brand, that's what I wanted. I wanted to go out on LinkedIn and be, look, I'm not the best editor in the world. I'm far from it. But what I am going to try and give you is some tips and techniques that I've learned along the way, tell you the stories that I've had, open up, be as honest as I can. I'm not going to try and gatekeep anything because I just want to help people who also may have struggled in a system where they're told that you won't really amount to that because you don't fit that box. Yeah. And so that's built a personal brand, I guess. I never really set out to build a personal brand. It was to try and help people. But now I'm seeing the power of a personal brand. That's probably why I'm sat here today, is because I've owned my skill set. I've owned my character. I've owned all of these things that make me and where I've got to. Yeah. And I'm just telling the world about it. And that's where I'd hope would make me different from other editors out there.
Yeah, I think it's super powerful because especially when you realize that people trust people and people want to buy from people and they are less likely to trust an institution but far more likely to trust a personality. Research has shown that people are way less likely to buy from organizations. People buy from people who they know, like, and trust. If you are a leader in industry, if you are a founder or an entrepreneur, you will have a strong growth story. And the smartest investment that you can make with your time is to share that growth story. If you like the look of these podcasts and you would like to have the full studio and photography experience at our London-based studios, then reach out to me. You'll find the details in the description. You yourself were attracted to the Diary of a CEO because of Jack's personal brand, right? I think you reached out to him directly. It's a no-brainer for leaders to be building their personal brands. You can't fake it when you look at a podcast because it is that long form storytelling. You know, you can't fake it for so long. If you're flawed, it's going to come through in the podcast. Have you ever seen a podcast transform somebody's personal brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's transformed Steve's brand. I think, you know, before if you were to take away the Diary of a CEO, from an outsider looking in, you would see Steve on Dragon's Den, you'd see him on events like Soccer Aid, and if you were interested in business, for example, you would probably see him speaking at an expo or at a festival. Yeah. But apart from that, you wouldn't really have seen it. I wouldn't have seen him because apart from potentially if I caught an episode of Dragon's Den, but what the podcast has allowed Steve to do is talk to really interesting people and people that he's curious about. And I think it's done great for Steve because it's shown to a lot of people how he's willing to have uncomfortable conversations for the greater good. It shows that he's eager to learn and he wants those lessons to be passed on to aspiring entrepreneurs and people just to live a better life. So I've seen it with his podcast. I've seen it with Paul, who's We Need to Talk. Again, Paul he started off working with Oprah. He was on Oprah's TV show. But I didn't know Paul until I saw an episode of Married at First Sight. Yeah. So then you have your conception of what Paul is from that TV show, and then I met him in person when he was on the Diary of a CEO. Loveliest guy ever. And from then on, like, my interest in his career and what he has to say has just grown and grown and grown. And now that he has this podcast, millions of other people are now getting to see that, because he gets to share more of his knowledge. He gets to speak to some incredible experts and a lot of celebrities and people who have got such varied stories that people can relate to. And so this will grow his brand massively. And I think the beauty of podcasts, whether you're owning a podcast or whether you're appearing on podcasts, they can both do the same thing, right? You're releasing content and you're releasing moments of expertise, or you're releasing lessons that other people can gain, and people are starting to see you and they can see who you are, like you said, the authenticity of it, because you can't hide behind it. You can cut things, but I think people will start seeing through that. This is what people love about podcasts, is that you can watch the entirety of an episode and guests get the chance to actually be able to explain themselves without being interrupted, or whether they have to spend 5 minutes talking about a traumatic past. People need time to talk about those stories and to open up and to feel comfortable in order to do that. And when they do that, that's when the audience reacts. That's when the audience can engage with you and feel like that empathy and feel closer connected to those guests. And it's the same with a lot of the experts that we have on. We're talking about some of the topics we talk about are really uncomfortable. And they can be really controversial, and they're very different to what mainstream media, for example, would write about. And so for a guest to come out and explain that, they need that time to be able to say, this is the problem, this is the cost, this is what we found, and this is why we think it's going to have the impact it's going to have. You can't really do that in 5 minutes. I mean, it's a challenge for me to do it in 90 seconds, but I get the beauty of leaving it on cliffhangers and changing topics, and I can sort of miss out those elements to just try and tee you into creating enough excitement to want to watch the full thing. But it's such a huge boost for any leader and for anyone who wants to thrive in a career to lean into the podcasting industry, to be able to tell their stories and to be able to try and pass their lessons on to other people.
I think that people trust podcast hosts more than they do a CEO on LinkedIn. It's interesting to me because you mentioned their emotional storytelling, right? What's interesting to me when you said that is that Steven is so good at drawing out these vulnerable moments, these experiences. And he said himself that he's like 95% behind driving the conversation. Like, he feels responsible for it. So he is, I would say, setting the leaders and the personalities and the celebrities that come up for success by drawing out those vulnerable stories. And I thought, yes, that's so true. How he prepares, I do not know. Because he's doing, like you said, it could be 1 to 15 in a week. So how does he prepare for these podcasts? Because I'll tell you one thing. It's a stat that I learned. Vulnerability, when you show that you're vulnerable, you are more trustworthy by 72%. People perceive you as being more trustworthy. Yes. And 50% more inspiring. So he really is doing them a favor by drawing out these vulnerable
100%.
stories. How is Steven Bartlett preparing? How does he draw out these stories?
I mean, there'll be things that he does to prepare himself beforehand, but I mean, he has an incredible team behind him. People who, when they book the guest, they'll research the guest, they'll speak to the guest, sometimes they'll speak to the guest's family. They'll do so much in-depth research on this person and create this brief. So Steve has everything that he needs. And when he goes into a conversation, he doesn't have any questions written down or anything like that. It's literally, he'll set it up and he just wants that conversation to flow, and he sees it as his responsibility to just keep the guest opening up and explaining and giving them the time that they need to be able to express themselves and do what they need to do. And he is incredibly gifted at that. And a lot of that just comes from him being curious. the way he talks on the podcast is just how he engages with people on a day-to-day basis. He just sits there and he wants to listen, and he wants to know your ideas. He wants to know your story. He wants to know how you've become you, and he takes that interest with his staff. He's taken that interest with the people that he meets at the meet and greets. You know, he's just very curious like that, and I think everyone at the studio is as well. For example, with me, I love learning about people, and I love learning about their stories, and I love learning where they are in like 10 years time and what their dreams are. And it's an amazing thing when you start listening to that sort of, you realize just how different we all are and how incredible it is because of it. And you know, it's amazing to see some of like big names open up and be vulnerable, because a lot of people would never see him in that light. You know, he's a legend in my eyes, is Chris Kamara, he's a panelist on Soccer Saturday. He was an ex-footballer. Yeah. And he was on Soccer Saturday. I don't know if he is anymore. Yeah. And he sort of became famous because he was almost a bit like the goofball on the show. Like they would cut to him so he'd have to give analysis and live updates on a match. So they would cut to him in a stadium. Yeah. Half the time he wasn't listening. Half the time he was confused what was going on. There was that famous catchphrase where it's like, "I don't know, Jeff." That sort of came from him because he was always like flummoxed, and his character was incredible, and that's what everyone knew him as this big ball of energy. And then he came into the studio, and that's what I was expecting. But a few months prior to that, or it might have been a bit more, but before that, he just sort of disappeared from the screens. Oh. And no one knew why. Yeah. And it was just this huge secret of like this huge, like it was a big part in loads of people's, every Saturday they would see this guy, and then he just disappeared. And he came in and he basically revealed about a condition that he had, which meant that he was like losing his ability to speak. It was a lot slower, and it was one of the most heartbreaking episodes I've ever seen, because it's the contrast between the two and the courage he had to do it. And not only did he open up, but then he also went so far to say that he was scared and he's worried that what he's got now is mean he'll never have a career again, that will never make him happy. And he opened up in such a way that the next weekend, his old team was playing, and they created a huge banner in the stadium for him saying that we're with you. He then got TV deals, and people just didn't care about it. They wanted to see Cammy on the screen again. And so just him opening up just touched the hearts of so many people. It was incredible to see. And we've seen that time and time again with A-list stars to CEOs to experts, to find out their why of why they're trying to find cures for some of the biggest diseases, why they want to help these people. Their why is so ingrained in them, and it's amazing to see that, and it's so relatable for so many people, and that's why it's just so important to have. And so I think for Steve, letting those conversations happen with the incredible research that his team have done just creates this perfect environment to let that flow.
Yeah. And you spent countless hours around Steven Bartlett. You spent so many hours around the guy that went from closet mic to building a $25 million media empire. The question is this: with all that time spent around him, how much of it's actually rubbed off onto you? So was there a moment, was there a conversation, or was there a decision that flip something inside your mind and you carry that to just cope?
Yeah, probably more than I would like to admit, to be honest. But he was the first one to introduce the 1% rule to me. And so it's just sort of made sense when he said it. And what I found was I implemented that in my work, but then I started implementing that into my life. And that's just changed the trajectory of how I'm feeling and how I'm sleeping and all of those things just by just that one thing that he taught me. But I think the biggest thing that I learned from him is just, or the biggest thing I've caught is like the infectious enthusiasm and drive that he has. He's probably the most driven human being that I've ever met. And to be fair, you probably have to be to get where he is. You can't settle for anything less. And it's hard to say whether I know I go off on these rants about always keep pushing yourself and pushing the boundaries and keep pushing further. I don't know how much of that I would have believed if I was working in a different company or for a different person. Mm-hmm. When you're with Steve, you don't really have much of a choice. If you want to go on this journey, it will be the rockiest career journey of your life. And for some people that might feel like a bit intimidating, but for me, it's been one hell of a journey because of it. And it has had huge highs, it has had lows, but that's just life, right? That whether it's work or personal life, you just get that. And that's something that we replicate in the trailers, is this idea of the constant wave and that you never want to be flat. And I can't imagine anything. There's been a few times where prior to working on DOAC where I experienced burnout, and there was moments where I nearly gave up any sort of career in editing or in storytelling or anything in that creative side. And I remember talking to Helena about it and my mum and dad, and they literally just turned to me and said, you would hate it within a month if you just got a normal 9 to 5. Yeah. And in my head, I was like, no, I wouldn't, because I'd get home and then I'd see people and I'd do things. But my dad was like, it's more to that. There's something, what we do, and when you're in this space of wanting to create content and tell stories and bring these pieces together, what sort of in you is like, it's like this burning fire and like this passion to really want to create something exciting and engaging and emotionally driven. And if you can't do that, that's when you start losing this purpose. And so he sort of saved me in that sense inadvertently, because he brought me into this world. And then he gave me this ownership, because when the trailers would come out and people would comment on it, he would tag me. I'm used to being white labeled. I was never allowed to showcase any of my work. So when you're working for big, huge film studios, they want them to think that they made everything. And so right, I guess. But he sort of gave that ownership, because it's like, this is the guy who made it, by the way. Yes. And and I get so much love from it, and that fuels me every single day to do it. I mean, you obviously get the good and the bad, and again, that's the wave of, like, with the comments and the messages and what some people like, other people hate, and you sort of learn to deal with that side of things. So that's built almost like this sort of fire in me to keep going, and it's also built how I can sort of respond to more of the negative side, or those doubts, or that imposter syndrome, all of those elements that would eat away with me. Being thrown into the open because of Steve has sort of made me deal with that hands-on. And so he's influenced my life and the whole team's life in ways that we probably have never really thought about. And in the end, it's a blessing that we've had this experience. No matter how long it goes on for, what I've learned already has been incredible enough that I can take it to, like, many years to come.
You're right about what does it take to be in the business like this. And I think you do have to be a people carer to really genuinely get to know people and want to understand them. What keeps him awake at night then? So what kind of metric or team dynamic might keep a personality like Steven Bartlett awake?
I never quite know, because I've never really asked him that. But my thought would be, whether it keeps him up at night or whether it's something that he's always striving for, is to never to settle. I think and to be honest, the team's biggest fear is that we settle, and we don't want that. We want to keep pushing the boundaries. We want to keep pushing it further and further and further, because it's the most cliche thing I've ever said in my life, and I'm still going to say it because I can't think of anything else to explain it, but this is probably going to get me rinsed by my mates forever. But that song by Miley Cyrus, The Climb, can't believe I'm saying this. I cannot believe I'm taking a Hannah Montana song and making it a part of my life. But it is this idea that, it fucking hell, it is the climb. I can't believe I've just said that. It is the climb, it's you can try and reach the top, but you'll never reach that top.
Right.
Or even if you do reach a top, you then need to come back down. And then what happens when you come back down? The adrenaline falls, you start settling, you realize what you had up there and you want that again. So then you go up on another climb. And so it's this feeling that just keep going, just keep pushing yourselves. And I think that's probably what keeps him, whether it keeps him up at night or not, I don't know. But I think that's something that he's always thinking of, is how can we just keep being better and how can we keep improving?
This is the 1%, right?
The 1%.
Yeah. Never get complacent.
Never.
As you have this pressure then to get bigger and to get better day after day, and it's unrelentless, especially with AI now in the fold, what's this fine line then? How do you dance this dance between ambition and burnout?
With a term like burnout, I think it got construed with this idea that if you don't have a 9-to-5 job, you are leading to burnout. And I think burnout is the consequence of when your goals of the day and your workload does not meet your purpose. And this is something a lot of editors and a lot of content creators, especially in our industry, deal with. It's this idea of, if you're an editor, if you're a storyteller, if you're writing a book, if you're making a film, you are putting so much passion into it, blood, sweat and tears. It's often a huge pain of a process, and I'm lucky that I have to go through that pain twice a week. It's tough. It's so tough, and it's so emotionally draining. So emotionally draining. And I've never loved holidays more, because you are putting so much passion into this and you're just building it up, and then it just stops. It gets released, it's done, but then you have to go straight back onto the other one and you have to make it better. And so you're in this constant pressure. And I feel like when you describe that to a lot of people, it does start sending these warning signs to people. It's like, how can you sustain this? How can you survive for this long? I've been doing this for 3 years now. How can you keep doing this and keep getting out of bed knowing that you've only got 2.5 days to make this trailer, which a lot of people have said some really lovely things about it in terms of comparing it to what a documentary you might see on Netflix, etc. But a lot of the times they can spend about 2 to 3 months making these trailers. We have 2.5 days to compact it, and we don't want our work to look like it's taking 2.5 days. We want it to look like it can take 2 months. And so when you're going through this endless cycle, it does send warning signals to people when you tell them that it's like, okay, this is not sustainable. You are going to burn out doing this. But I think the thing that's keeping me going is this idea of purpose. And Steve's given me that purpose. The podcast has given me that purpose. The community that we've built has now given me that purpose. LinkedIn has now given me that purpose. It is a purpose of wanting to just be better and to entertain people and to just pour my heart and soul into something. And when you sort of twist that on the other side, it's an amazing thing that twice a week I get to just pour all my energy and pour so much passion into a project. And I get to do that all the time. And I get that creative freedom, and I get to tell stories, and I get to change tiny little things. And I get to just do one thing that, when I explain it on LinkedIn, can blow someone's mind, but yet it's the smallest thing on the planet that I've just done. And so when you twist it like that, how would you not enjoy doing what you do, and like working every so often, working the late hours and working like the odd weekend, because you're doing something that is touching a lot of people's hearts, and it's leading to a greater good, and it's also driving you and pushing you forward as a person. And so I'm quite lucky in a sense that I get to be in touch with my emotions every single day, and that they just don't get switched off.
So then I'm dying to ask you the next question. When you're looking for the best fit people that will fit into this special environment, quite a hard work ethic, you know, what are you looking for? Is it specific skills, or is it something deeper than that? And do they even know what you're looking for? I mean, do they even realize what they're bringing to the table?
For me, obviously you need the technical skills, but I always feel a bit of a hypocrite saying that, because I don't have the technical skills. Like, it's just something I've had to adapt and learn. These days, with the software that we have at our fingertips, even when I first started, it was so expensive to get editing software. So you had to learn on the cheapest or the free software, which had none of the same features and things like that. Yeah. And so then eventually, when we could afford to get Adobe, we got Adobe and things like that. So you do need the technical skills. But for me, skills can always be taught. What is a lot more difficult to teach is finding people who have such passion and the willingness to outcare the people and unapologetically care. I sort of went through it myself, where there was a time where I almost felt a bit embarrassed to say how much effort we put into the trailers and how much details we put in. There was a part of me that was like, people are going to think I'm a bit of a prick, or that I'm self-righteous, or it's going to be things like, why is he doing that? He's just trying to any of these things. And there was a little twinge of embarrassment there. I didn't really want to post that on LinkedIn, because maybe it was an imposter syndrome thing, I'm not sure. But the reality of it is, now I'm sort of unapologetically saying that we put so much effort in, and that we care so much about a podcast. I'm saying that with so much confidence now, because the impact that it's had on me as a person, and the impact it's had on my team and the whole Flightstory team is incredible, and the purpose that it's given people and the impact that it's had on the millions of people who are watching daily, it's a really special thing. And so for me, the biggest thing that I would want in someone is someone who's willing to learn, but is more importantly willing to care so much about what they're doing. Because when you care about it, you can fail as much as you like, but you see those as learnings. If you care about something, you just have this purpose that even in the tough times it gets you through, and in the great times it feels so much better because you have that care behind you.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Out care. I was going to take that one away. And I know exactly what you mean when you say, I'm sometimes thinking, should I say this? It's a bit, almost embarrassing. And I feel that sometimes when I think about how much time it takes me to prepare for some guests. You're reframing it for me now.
Well, I think there's that stigma, isn't there, really, that it's you shouldn't care that much about your job. Yes. And especially with me, I grew up, a lot of my family and a lot of my friends have 9 to 5s. There's something, I see there's a difference between a job and a career. A job is your 9 to 5. It serves its purpose. You don't have the passion there. You don't have the dream of working in that job, but it pays your bills, it pays for your family, and you get to go home, you get to spend the weekend with those people. A career is very different. A career is often a lot of tears, a lot of pain. It's the rockiest road ever. It may not be the best paid job in the world. It involves a lot of late hours, but it's igniting something in you that these people don't have. And when you look back on it, and when I think back of all the things that I've done, it with GADWAT, and when I was working in the film industry, and when I had a company before that, I never think about the hard moments. Or if I do think about the hard moments, I look at back on them as like, Christ, how did we do that? That's like of pride.
Yes.
And you're looking back at all these things, and I think it's because a lot of the time we've combined the two together. So career and job is the same thing, and so you get the stigma of the job, which is to have a career. You shouldn't really care about it that much. It's not something to brag about. It's not important. Whereas the reality of it is, if you spend, I don't know, 2/3 of your life working, whether it's a job or whether it's a career, you're doing that. So why not make it something you care so much about, and that you just want to shout about all the time?
Everyone talks about the killer interview question. And I think about this because a lot of my life, my working life, I've spent as a recruiter. And so I'm thinking to myself, is there a favorite interview question that you've used or someone in the GADWAT team uses to really get to the heart of someone, of what they really like, cut through the BS?
It's so strange because this is something I was never taught. I was just thrusted into a world of, by the way, you need to do interviews now. But I think it's quite nice because I wasn't trained on it. I can approach it in a slightly different way. And the way I got this job, it was literally me just talking to Jack for 2 hours on Zoom on New Year's Eve one day. And so I don't really know what the traditional questions are. A question I love to ask is, what is the question you wish I asked you, and what is the answer? Because that, for me, that does a few things. It gets people thinking about what is that question. And sometimes you sort of learn a lot about the person by what they think the question is. So some people will go into their background. Some people will go into their technical skills. Some people will go from a failure that they had. So you get to learn a lot about someone because it's a question that they've had to think about themselves, and it's a part of themselves that they want to express usually. And I always find it quite interesting because it's an interesting approach to how you think the question should be to get you a job. And I think that says a lot about someone.
Now, I like that. I like that for a couple of reasons, but mainly because it's not a common interview question. And
good.
it's so, no, it's not. I can tell you that much because I know all the common ones, having been a recruiter for so long. And I like it because it's not one that they can easily prepare for. Do you find that you're able to read people? Because you've just described yourself as being someone that's not an experienced interviewer, but I do feel like you're quite... that you read people quite well. Am I making an assumption? Or let's put it this way. When you hire people, or when you're involved in the recruiting process to hire people, has your judgment worked out to be quite sound?
I believe so. Am I good at reading people?
Yeah.
Not in the sense of like Darren Brown. I can't do that stuff. No. I can't tell by how many times you're blinking, but I think I probably have a good sense. I like to try and understand people. People fascinate me, so I just love sitting there and listening to people talk, and I love finding out more about them, their backgrounds, their stories, because ultimately that's what shapes us to be who we are. And you can always take something from someone or like a part of their story that you could potentially implement into your own life to make it better in some way. So I think I'm just quite open to people's emotions and their vulnerabilities and how they're feeling, and I just love listening to people.
Have you seen that podcast with Chase Hughes? He talks a lot about reading people. We watched that one.
Oh, cool.
It's one that Stephen did, and I watch a lot of Chase Hughes as well. So he'll talk about blink rate and things like and body language. So that one you might actually, a lot of recruiters should end up watching content like that about body language and just the different cues about even if the eyes, you know, if they move around the room like this, and even this, if I did that shows, it sends a little bit of nervousness. Mo GADWAT is another really, really cool guest, and I think he's been on twice or so. Met him?
Yeah.
Amazing guy. I think he's literally written the book on happiness.
Yes.
What conversation or moment have you spent with him? Because I have a lot of respect for him, especially given his background with the son of his story, the story of his son. What moment or conversation have you had with him that's really helped you to almost cope with all of the chaos that goes with building a media empire, if you like?
I think with Mo, he's just one of those people who he literally practices what he preaches. And so many people, they tend to go around saying they've got the antidote for happiness and how to live a happy life, and for some people it's a bit of a mask that they're wearing, or they're trying to sell a product. But with Mo, there was one moment where it's funny that you mentioned with his son. This was more in the earlier days, and I was cutting a trailer and I wanted to bring in that moment with his son, because again, we want to build that emotional journey. And you always have a little bit of nervousness when you're building those elements, because you are cutting a piece of their life and a very emotional and traumatic moment of their life. So you always want to do it justice, and you don't want to leave things out. You want to give it the pace that it deserves. And so it's a huge challenge when you're dealing with real people, how you make them representative in a trailer. And especially in those moments. So I was quite nervous about it, because the guy is great, and he's talking about happiness, and it's like, how can we weave into this moment and how we can get a lesson from there? And the trailer went out, and he actually sent me a voice note on Instagram, and he was just, the words he said were beautiful. It was just like how impressed he was at first, and how amazing he loved it. He's watched it time and time again, and how I've played such a crucial part in making his day, but how it's also going to impact so many people. And it was beautiful to hear, really, because you don't have to do that. And every so often a guest will do that. Jefferson Fisher was actually another one yesterday who sent me a message, and they're the people where you can tell that they practice what they preach. And ever since then, I'm a big fan of Mo, and I think the way he explains things is so perfect. And I think everyone can learn a lot about just how he is as a person, and how calm he is, and how he presents himself. I think for me, that was the biggest thing, is that, again, he was just very open to have that conversation, knowing that it will lead to helping so many other people.
Yeah, and you mentioned something very interesting there about the sheer responsibility you have of representing these personalities, these real stories, these people. That's a lot, because you are, in a sense, almost being like their PR, their marketing person, if you know what I'm saying, because you're elevating their brand.
We've had people use the trailers as their video before they walk out on stage.
No, like, for shows?
For shows. Paul Brunson, I was talking to Paul once, and he said he literally used the trailer from his first appearance to introduce him when he'd done a speaking gig in Jamaica.
No.
And I was like, that's insane.
That is amazing.
I should have charged. But it was like, things like that are amazing when you hear it, because that you're playing with who they are and how millions of people are going to perceive them. And so you do have to do your research into whether some of them might like being a bit more of the pantomime villain. They play on that. Some people quite like the controversial route. Other people, they're more sweet and they handle things a little bit different. So everything from the actual context of what they're saying, to the music, to the sound design, to the B-roll, to the text that we lay out, all of that needs to play into their character that we want to represent with them. And ultimately for me, it's something that, I mean, it's never been told to me, but it's something I've always wanted, which is I want to make sure that the guest feels represented and that the end experience of it is a positive one for them.
Well, I think you're ticking a lot of boxes. Imagine Diary of a CEO in about 5 years' time. This is a podcast where you don't just get to talk on it or to listen to it, but you get to experience it by actually being able to shape the conversation, feel the emotion in the room, the intensity, smell the coffee on the table, feel the heartbeat of the speaker. So this kind of multidisciplinary experience, immersive experience, if you had to pick any one of them, which one would you want to really drive for the viewer? What's most important?
Scent.
Scent. Smell.
I think scent's an important, and I think the reason why is Disney do this extremely well. When you go to a Disney park, how they want you to feel is they have certain scents on how they make you want to feel.
Yeah.
So, for example, when you're walking down Main Street, which is their main road which leads to the castle,
Yes.
as you're walking past, they'll let out different scents from vents as you're going through it. So you walk past one bit and you get this smell of popcorn, and then you get candy floss. And I mean, to be fair, a big part of it is to make you hungry, so you can spend $20 on some popcorn. But it's like they have all of these like nostalgic, almost like guilt-free scents going on and playing around, and it just makes you feel happier, and it just makes you feel more engrossed in the experience. And then you go on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and they have the smell of their water is so distinct. They actually, on like Etsy, you can buy candles with the Pirates of the Caribbean water scent on it. So even that, so if you're a diehard Disney fan, or if you're going on, you can sit on the ride and you're expecting that smell. And smell plays such a huge part. I mean, when it comes to food, I think it's probably like 80% of our taste comes from our smell. And so for me, adding some sort of scent into that experience would be pretty incredible.
I think that would be everything, because it's so mood changing. It's such a big influence on the mood, and then how you feel and what you think is everything.
And the decisions you make. Because they've done studies on that with like placing like smells of rubbish next to I don't know exactly what the experiment was, but it's like decision making when you're sat next to bad smells against good smells, and how quick you make decisions are, or how accurate the decisions are, how positive the decisions are, and things like that. It's crazy.
Also take social media and the influence that social media has on making your content discoverable and engaging to another level if it has scent, right? Is there a trend that not many people are talking about that you think is going to be big in the next year?
My advice to anyone who is going to start a podcast, start as a video podcast now. I think even if you're just using it for clips or for social, think about adding video in it from the off, whether it's one camera, whether it's two cameras, until you get to GADWAT's like 9 cameras.
9, really?
So think of that as first, because it's not so much a trend, but that's where it's going to be going. And it also ticks off so many boxes for social media content, and playing into all and repurposing content, all of that sort of element you need, the visual side there. So that's what I would advise anyone to do.
I think short form is so massive in terms of driving people.
It's huge. It's because again, not everyone wants to listen to a podcast, and so the beauty of the Diary of CEO clips is with the trailers, obviously that's job is to lead you to the episode, but the actual clips themselves, they're self-contained, so you can just watch that one clip and get everything you need to know in that moment, and that suits a certain person. Why not have both? You know, there's always this one or the other, and it's, you can have so many different fingers in the pie if you want to. You just have to learn how to make it more streamlined and more adaptable, and how you can then repurpose all of that content.
Yeah, it's so smart the way you use it. That could take us into another podcast all in itself. But what about you? Where do you see yourself? Oh my God, I'm also almost starting to sound like a recruiter here again. But where do you see yourself in the coming years? Is Diary of a CEO the only thing that you want to focus on right now? Or can you visualize a life that's outside of the Diary of a CEO?
I'm not too sure. I mean, I love my role here. I love the team that I have. I love my responsibilities now of training others, and I love what I do every single day. The beauty is I've learned, especially in this industry, you can't think too far ahead.
Yes.
Because life is going to throw so many different curveballs at you that if I have a fixed thing in my head that I'm going to go here, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, when they don't happen, you either end up disappointed or you end up potentially on a road that you're not supposed to be on. Mm-hmm. So I tend not to actually think about it. I want to try and be more in the moment, I guess, in that sense. But I mean, I love my role here. If I could be here forever and see how far we can take this show, then that I can only see that as a blessing, really. But a big part of my life now is focusing on growing the other aspects in terms of my relationships, my families, that sort of side of things, the personal side as well.
Yeah. Where could be the next level internally for you? You're director of trailers right now. What could be like the next level up?
Director of video, perhaps. So overseeing all of the video content and coming up with ideas on how to experiment with them and how we can push the boundaries of video and immersive experiences.
Sounds amazing. I've loved every moment of the podcast with you. Thank you so much, Ant.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Subscribe to this channel and I'll make sure more leadership stories show up in your feed. Thank you for being here.